Continuing the Bioshock review with Bioshock 2, I had similar experience with it playing it during the release on Xbox 360 at 2010. Originally, so the question is how does it hold up and is the remastered version better? I played the original and remastered back to back for this review. It was released for Microsoft Windows, Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 in February 2010. Bioshock Remastered was released on September 13, 2016 as a part of Bioshock the Collection, which included remastered versions of Bioshock 1, 2 and original version of Bioshock Infinite, as well as the single-player downloadable content. I'm going to talk about the gameplay, graphics, reception, and plot in this review. Plot is something I will talk in the end and will let you know when the plot talk starts. Minor spoilers might be included while talking on other stuff about it. I also played Bioshock 1 and Bioshock Infinite with the two necessary DLCs for the story, and I have to say it makes me appreciate the story of a whole trilogy so much more. Infinite wraps the trilogy in such a good way. Before I start, I want to talk shortly about the differences between original and remastered versions. Bioshock 2 Remastered features several notable differences from the original game. The remastered version includes updated graphics with higher resolution, textures, improved lighting, which though doesn't always look better, but they are technically better. But the game also runs at higher frame rate, which makes the gameplay feel so much smoother and more responsive. Various bug fixes are also included to address issues that were present in the original game. The remastered version also included all the single-player DLC that was released for the Bioshock 2, such as the Minerva's Den and Protector Trials DLC. Finally, the remastered version supports modern controllers like the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 controllers, which was not available for the original game. Overall, Bioshock 2 Remastered offers a most polished and modernized experience of Bioshock 2 versions. If you're a fan of the series or interested in playing the game for the first time, the remastered version is the recommended way to experience Bioshock from me. Mainly due to the original being so taped together like with the Bioshock 1 too. Bioshock 2 is a first-person shooter just like the original one with some role-playing elements. The gameplay involves exploration, combat and puzzle solving as the player navigates through the dystopian underwater city of Rapture. As Big Daddy, the player has access to more powerful weapons and plasmids, which are genetically engineered abilities that can be used to manipulate environment or attack enemies. The player also gathers resources such as ammunition, health, and Eve, which is basically mana. It's used to power the plasmids by looting corpses, vending machines, and other objects found throughout the game. One unique feature of Bioshock 2 is the ability to adopt and protect little sisters, young girls who have been genetically modified to collect valuable substance called Adam, which is used for the plasmids and gene manipulation. The players can choose to harvest Adam from the little sisters, killing them in the process, or they can choose to rescue them, which will reward the player with a smaller amount of Adam but spare the little sister's life. The game has very black and white moral choice system, which is extremely simple to select if you want a good or a bad ending. Bioshock 2 has a diverse selection of guns that the players can use to take down enemies in the game. These guns range from conveniential firearms to more unique weapons that are specific to game's setting in the underwater city of Rapture. For example, the rivet gun is a powerful weapon that fires rivets, which can be used to impale enemies. Additionally, players can choose to use classic weapons such as the shotgun, which is now a double-barrel one, a fully automatic machine gun, which is now basically a Gatling gun, or the grenade launcher, which is now more of a rocket launcher. Unique weapons like the spear gun, a harpoon gun that fires different kind of bolts, as an example, explosive bolts, add even more variety to the gameplay experience. Each gun in Bioshock 2 has its own strengths and weaknesses, and players can choose which weapons they prefer based on their playstyle and the situation they are in. Moreover, the players can upgrade their weapons throughout the game using the game's currency, which can increase their effectiveness. Weapons are more balanced this time around, but they're still clearly best ones compared to a couple others. Bioshock 2 introduces same old plasmids with small changes to the original, just like the weapon system. Players wide variety of plasmids, which are genetically engineered abilities that can be used to attack enemies or manipulate the environment. Plasmids can be found scattered throughout the Rapture and can also be purchased from vending machines using the game's currency. The plasmids in Bioshock 2 are divided into two categories, combat and non-combat. Combat plasmids include abilities such as Incinerate, which allows the player to shoot fireballs at enemies, and Cyclone Trap, which creates vortex of energy that can knock enemies off their feet. These are very few plasmids that you can combine also, like Cyclone Trap, you can create a fire trap. Non-combat plasmids, on the other hand, include abilities such as Telekinesis, which allows the player to pick up and throw objects, and Insect Zone, which sends swarm of bees to attack enemies. Upgrading a plasmid can provide a variety of benefits, such as increased damage, longer duration, or reduced cost to use. Overall, the plasmids in Bioshock 2 are an essential part of the gameplay experience, offering a wide variety of combat and non-combat abilities that can be used to approach challenges in a variety of ways. With ability to combine and upgrade plasmids, players have a lot of flexibility on how they choose to play the game. One of the strengths of Bioshock are again immersive world building and how it extends to the gameplay mechanism as well. The plasmids and genes that players can acquire are all tied to the lore and history of Rapture, giving them a sense of context and meaning within the game world. This attention to detail adds to the overall experience and makes the game world feel more believable. Enemies. The most common enemies are again the Splicer, genetically enhanced humans who have become addicted to Adam, the substance that powers plasmids. There are several types of Splicers in the game, each with unique abilities and weaknesses. For example, Turkish Splicers are strong but slow, while Spider Splicers are agile and can crawl on walls and ceilings and throw shit at you. Another common enemy in Bioshock 2 is the Big Sister, powerful enemies that are responsible for protecting the Little Sisters. Big Sisters are fast and agile and can use plasmids to attack players. Interestingly, the Big Sisters are also grown up earlier versions of the Little Sisters. They are particularly challenging to defeat, and the player will encounter them at several points throughout the game. Also, some old robotics like flying turrets, grand turrets and security cameras appear again. There are a couple boss battles which pit the player against particularly powerful enemies. These boss battles can be quite challenging if you haven't explored around, but if you have upgraded your weapons and health, you do feel like a big daddy against an ant farm. If I recall correctly, there is no boss, like individual boss battles, like the last boss of Bioshock 1, but there are boss arenas, I would say. Reception. When the game was released originally, many reviewers praised the game's immersive atmosphere, compelling storyline and engaging gameplay. The ability to play as Big Daddy was also seen as a welcome addition, as it allowed players to experience Rapture from a new perspective. The game's graphics and sound design were also highly praised, with many critics noting that the attention to detail is improved since the first game to create a Rapture more believable. However, some reviewers felt that the game didn't quite live up to the high standards set by the original Bioshock. Some criticized the game's pacing, which they felt was slower than the first game. Others felt that the game's story wasn't as compelling as the original, and that the game relied too heavily on nostalgia for the predecessor. Overall, Bioshock 2 was generally well received by critics and has since become a beloved entry in the Bioshock series. Its engaging gameplay and immersive atmosphere and strong storyline have made it a favorite among the fans of the series, and it remains a popular game among the gamers to this day. Crashing is something that causes me almost to quit the second game too. More in the original version, but even during the end of Remastered, it again started to crash. So quick saving became an essential every minute or two, so I wouldn't have to replay every section multiple times. Graphics in the Bioshock 2 features several improvements to the graphics and visual presentation of the game compared to its predecessor. These improvements help to create more immersive and atmospheric game world, making it feel more realistic and detailed. One of the most notable improvements is the lighting effect. Bioshock 2 features improved lighting which adds to the game's atmosphere greatly. The lighting effects are particularly impressive when exploring the underwater city of Rapture in places that are dark and overflown. The use of shadows and lights create the sense of tension and fear, making the game's environment feel more dangerous and unpredictable. Another improvement is the textures of the game. The game's textures have been updated and improved in many ways, making the world of Rapture feel more detailed while the game working smoother. This is particularly noticeable in close-up shots of objects or characters with the camera, where they appear more detailed and polished. This makes the game feel more immersive and helps the players to connect with the game world. The underwater effects in Bioshock 2 are also impressive, as always. As the game is set in the underwater city, it features a lot of water effects, bubbles, currents, reflections. These effects are well executed and add to the game's realism, helping to create the feeling of being submerged in an underwater city. Overall, Bioshock 2 graphics are improvement over the first game. The attention to detail and improved lighting, textures and underwater effects all add to the atmosphere and keep you invested to the game world. And even to this date, the graphics hold up great because it is a little bit stylized and instead of fully realistic, and that always makes the games last so much better. I will be now talking about the story of the game. The story in Bioshock 2 is primarily told through the combination of traditional cutscenes, audio recordings and environmental storytelling. Environmental storytelling is also an important aspect of the game's narrative. Story is also conveyed through the game's mechanism, particularly the player's interaction with Little Sisters and the other NPCs that are connected to this plot. How players choose to treat the Little Sisters, either rescuing them or harvesting them for Adam, will have significant impact on the outcome. The game begins with the player character subject Delta being revived by a Little Sister in a white chamber. The game then flashes back to Delta's past as a Big Daddy, specifically his connection to the little sister named Eleanor. Delta was paired with Eleanor as his little sister shortly after her birth, and the two developed a strong bond. Fast forward to the present day, and Delta wakes up in an underwater city of Rapture to find that things have changed. The city is now under control of Sophia Lamb, a political leader who has established a new ideology called the Family. that emphasize selflessness and greater good for the community over individualism. God damn, individualism. Delta discovers that Eleanor has been taken by Lamb, who has plans to use her for her own purposes. Delta is driven by his connection to Eleanor and his desire to rescue her, and sets out on a mission to find her and to stop Lamb's plan. As Delta explores Rapture, he encounters various characters, some of whom are his enemies and others who have become his allies. Among his enemies are Splicers, the deranged inhabitants that I mentioned earlier, who are basically Adam addicts, the substance that grants superhuman abilities in the Bioshock universe. Delta must also face other Big Daddies, who are now controlled by Lamb and her followers. Among Delta's allies are other characters who share his desire to defeat Lamb and rescue Eleanor. These include Grace Holloway, a former singer who is now leading the opposition against Lamb, and Augustus Sinclair, a businessman who runs the company that specializes in supplying resources and equipment to those who are fighting against Lamb. As Delta progresses through the game, he learns more about the history of Rapture, including the role that Sophia Lamb and her family played in the city's downfall. He also uncovers more about his own past and his connection to Eleanor. In the game's climatic final, Delta faces off against Lamb and her followers with Eleanor, and it's a big, like I said, there are no certain boss fights, but it's a big arena where you fight with a big sister as who is Eleanor, now a teenager. Your baby girl has now turned a teenager over the 10 years of being in a coma, and it's a Big Daddy and Big Sister versus the world. I hope you enjoyed this review, and leave a like, dislike, subscribe for more content.